the candles of the menorah of the Beis Hamikdash was not above the Seder Ishtalshelus.
It's 7.
Right. But
17 candles with 7, so 7 represents this.
Okay. But is it true that the candles of the Beis Hamikdash were not above the Seder Ishtalshelus?
Well, if you just compare the Hanukkah, it's not, but in general it is actually.
All right. So what? Okay. So explain more about that. How can you be above the Seder Ishtalshelus but not really? Yeah.
No, because there's like this level of. Go for it. I'm just shooting.
Still connected to level 7.
Level 7.
It's still connected. Okay.
Because when it says Panisa Atik, it says it's going beyond, but it's going beyond something, which means it's.
No, the regular Atik is going beyond.
It's regular Atik, but it's going beyond something. So
right.
Therefore, there's a catch or something like we said, like a divorcee is like you're still connected to that thing that you're
Okay. Okay. Good. So that's the idea, basically. The only way to get completely beyond the Seder Ishtalshelus, that you don't even have any shaykhs to it anymore, is this level of Pnimius Atik.
Yeah.
And therefore, when we say that Hanukkah is L'mayla min Hateva, and it's like it's an Indian of 8, and the candles of the menorah, the menorah of the Mikdash, is an Indian of Hishtalshelus, this is exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about that Hanukkah hits this level, which is beyond the Seder Hishtalshelus, like in every possible way that you can imagine. In other words, even though the Mikdash was also beyond the Seder Hishtalshelus, it still has some connection to it, whereas Hanukkah has no connection to it. Therefore, what is it? It's representative of this Pnimius Atik. And really, we said that's kind of like a shocking thing, because the real time the Pnimius Atik even first was like available into the world was on Yutes Kislev. But Hanukkah already had it sort of like hidden there. That was like because Hanukkah is connected with oil. And we said that the whole idea of oil is specifically the perfect metaphor for this level of divinity, because it has two aspects. On one hand, it's completely removed from every other liquid. Then on the other hand, it sort of drips in and gets into every single thing. And that was indicative of the concept that on one hand, it's totally disconnected from anything having to do with the worlds, even in a slight way. But on the other hand, in the worlds themselves, anywhere you look for it, you can find it. In other words, because it is the essential basis of everything, so we said it's like finding the Mayan, the wellspring, right. Everywhere you look, because basically there's nothing at a certain level. That's all there is. That's, in other words, so that anywhere you're going to see anything in any place, you're not seeing the worlds because it's beyond the worlds. But so what are you seeing? You're seeing the wellspring, the underlying essence of Hashem that is in every place. So that's an oil. And Hanukkah's already like beat the Alter Rebbe to the oil like 2,000 years before. It's just that basically it's sort of like a lot of things. It was there, but it wasn't unpacked and uncovered like what that miracle of Hanukkah really was. I guess you could say it came in at the time of Hanukkah, and that miracle that we got at Hanukkah did bring down that level of light, but it was like a temporary thing. It came and it went, and it didn't get sort of brought into the world in a really official way until the Alter Rebbe came out of prison, and the Chabad Hasidic movement basically began.
Does that have anything to do with the Ohr Ganuz?
Ohr Ganuz? It is, because that's what we say. Hanukkah is connected to the Ohr Ganuz. There's 36 candles that we light over the 8 days. Altogether there's 36. And that represents the 36 hours. Huh? What's the Ohr Ganuz? The hidden. The Ganuz means hidden. And it's the light that Hashem made on the first day. And it says like it wasn't Vayhi Or, we said and there was light. What kind of light was it? Because the sun and the moon weren't created till the 4th day. So it wasn't a regular light. It was basically the light of God. It was this hidden light that was hidden for the tzaddikim in the time to come. It was like the light of Mashiach, basically. So we're saying that it's connected with the number 36. Why? Who knows why?
What, the Ohr Ganuz?
Yeah.
36.
Just 3 goes into 612.
Nice. Because in the Garden of Eden, it was shining the whole time. Adam was like using this light, not so much the light of the sun.
He was glowing, wasn't he?
He was on fire there. But the main thing is that he could look into this light. He could see everything. He could see us sitting here having this conversation. Like the entire time and space was open to him because he was looking into this light where everything is contained. And the idea is that even though he was banished from Gan Eden, that was Erev Shabbos, basically, right?
He was banished Erev Shabbat?
He was. Well, he was, but Hashem like sort of did him a kindness, and all while Shabbos was going on, he didn't get banished yet. In other words, he was punished and decreed to go out. But on Shabbos, he was able to like sort of hang out in the garden, and therefore he got all together. He wound up having this light was shining because it didn't go out on Shabbos for 36 hours. So there's like an idea of 36 hours of this light, and therefore we light 36 Hanukkah candles. That's the whole secret of like Shammai and Hillel, that they added this extra mitzvah where you do it in increasing measure because they get to the number of 36 because the Hanukkah candles contain the Ohr Ganuz, and it's actually a whole thing that it's written even in like 36 hours.
Shabbos is 36 hours.
Shabbos 24.
From the time it was decreed that
From the time what happened was it was like it was 36 hours of daylight because I guess night didn't happen, Shabbos night. So that 12 hours, he was I don't exactly remember how it goes. He was created on the which hour?
Who, Adam?
3 hours before.
No, but he was created in the beginning of the day on Friday. So there was day there, and then the night, which would have been Shabbos by night, it wasn't night because it was illuminated by the Ohr Ganuz. So there was no night, and then there was the regular day of Shabbos. So that was basically 36 hours. In other words, he was around for 12 hours when he was created. From the time he was created until Shabbos came was 12 hours. And then 24 hours of Shabbos day. It's 36. And the Motzi Shabbos he had to leave. The point being is that there's a whole thing, it's brought down, I was going to say in Sfarim, even like Kitzur Sfarim that we have, Chabad is like a little handbook, just like taken out, Kitzur, what do you say, Kitzur, condensed version of the Shulchan Aruch, like small summaries, but they didn't leave out that. Like in the bottom of it says, and by the way, if you should look at the Hanukkah candles, okay, it's a little late if we missed it, but you should stare into them because you're looking at the Ohr Ganuz. In other words, when you light the Hanukkah candles, it's actually this mystical light of the Ohr Ganuz. It only like releases itself for those few hours that we have the Hanukkah candles in front of us.
You're going to watch candles?
Yeah. When you light the actual light itself is like some kind of, it's not a regular light. It's a mystical light. And okay, so that's the idea, is that really they got the level of Panimius Atik at that time. It's just that now we have it in the form of Chassidus anytime we want it. Okay.
And it's also the ending of like Shlichus, huh? Like the Shlich, it's like a wellspring himself.
Yeah. Let's speak about that for a second. It's a good point. One of the big differences, it's a good point, not just because it's very interesting, but it's mamash exactly what we're talking about here. One of the differences between, the Chassidus in general had great opponents, and those were called the Misnagdim. And they were like basically of like the Lithuanian Jews that were the majority of like the learned Jews, and they felt like the whole Hasidic movement was like an aberration, it should be stopped, and they came against the Baal Shem Tov, they came against the Maggid, whatever. They were defeated in terms of the fact that the teachings continued to be spread. But even after sort of Chassidus got it rooted in, there was then opponents against the Alter Rebbe from the other Chassidim. In other words, we were talking about it the other day, that after there was 2 generations where there was just one Rebbe, and it was agreed upon by all that this was the Rebbe, and that was the Baal Shem Tov, and after him he handed it over to the Maggid of Mezrich, and all the Chassidim were one, basically. There was just the Chassidic movement, the Chassidim, and the Rebbe. And they were all like wondrous people. All the Chassidim were on the highest caliber and everything, but there was just one Rebbe. After the Maggid passed away, he had many great students, and each of them was fit in their own sense to be like the leader of thousands. So what happened is the Alter Rebbe was, basically, it was more or less assumed that he was the leader, because the Maggid gave him a lot of special authority, and he told him to write a Shulchan Aruch, which is basically the greatest feat that one can do on earth. He encoded the entire, not encoded, he codified the entire Jewish law, which had only been done a couple times in the entirety of history before him. And anyway, he was the youngest of the Maggid students, so it was like, but also he was given a certain task to take over all of the funds collecting. Basically, in a certain sense, he was clearly appointed as the leader, but nonetheless, he wasn't so clear, because these other students, they themselves were so incredible and such wondrous people that it wasn't like everything was pointing to the Alter Rebbe in such a clear way. So in fact, since the Alter Rebbe was starting this kind of radical new version of Chassidus, which is called Chabad. And what was radical about it was that he was changing the whole way Chassidus was learned. That he basically, not to get into the whole thing too much right now, but he brought all the teachings out in an intellectual format. Whereas up until that time, there was an intentional withholding on the part of the Rebbes from really letting all the information out and telling it as it is. Like the Rebbe knew, and the Rebbe sort of was like letting out little secrets here and there, and the Chassidim were, enthralled by that, but those who knew maybe were shared like one by one, but the idea of writing down like all the secrets and letting there be no stone unturned about really what is the mysteries of the Torah, it was not delivered. First of all, it was not delivered.
That's problems with
Say it again.
those that were against the movement in the beginning.
Right.
And
The Misnagdim. They were furious about the whole thing.
so if it would have been written down, they would have.
Well, they were anyway opposed to the whole thing. So I mean, this is within the Hasidim already. They all agreed that we should be spreading these teachings. But to the extent that the Alter Rebbe wanted to spread them, not only that they should go to more people, but the amount of information that should come out, he also turned up the volume about 1,000 times. In other words, they were teaching like little nuggets of it, and they were bringing light to things that had never been known before, but they were just like sort of sharing a little bit here, a little bit there. Because spreading these teachings to begin with was very controversial. In other words, for thousands of years, why wasn't this information spread? It was always known by certain wondrous people. But the Kabbalah was basically withheld because there's actually laws in the Torah prohibiting, to some degree, us to teach Kabbalah. So the Misnagdim, they weren't just simply the bad guys. They were like looking at the Shulchan Aruch and they were saying, it says here not to do what you're doing. So they had a point. But the thing is that the Rebbe knows what he's doing. It's like the Baal Shem Tov was like Moses, So if he's going to come and say, like, time has come for us to spread these teachings, I'll explain to you later why it doesn't look like what it says in your books. Since he's like the master of Torah in a certain sense, he sort of has this authority, which is very scary for them. Because what do you mean? The Torah is the master of authority, not a man who claims to know better than us, So, but he was bringing out sort of like a new revelation of Judaism, which by this day and age, it's already been stamped into the annals of history. No one anymore denies the authenticity and the perfection of the Hasidic movement in every way. No one's really opposing it, as it were, that these teachings should come out. But at the time, it was mamish controversial. But what happened was that even after it got sort of past the Misnagdim, even within the Hasidim, they started coming against the Alter Rebbe. Because they were saying, you're doing it in a way that was not sanctioned. And he was basically saying, just like it wasn't sanctioned before, but the Rebbe felt that he was confident enough to sanction it because he was the Rebbe. Basically, the Alter Rebbe saying, I'm the Rebbe, and I'm sanctioning like a new level of Chassidus, and I apologize that you don't understand me, but just like the Misnagdim of old, you're like the Misnagdim of new. Like, trust me, I know what I'm doing. So he forged like a whole new path, and that's what Yud-Tes Kislev was. What he was really doing was bringing out the Panimius of Atik, and they just weren't ready for that. But the point is that I wanted to bring out with Baruch, this is why I went into this rant right here, is because the difference really between them is that the Alter Rebbe established a system whereby he could give you the book and the information was all in there more or less, and you could go to some faraway land and become like enlightened without being in front of the Rebbe, as it were. Because this is the whole concept of the wellspring. Up until that time, if you wanted to get the Hasidic light, you had to be by the Rebbe. Because the source of the light was the Rebbe. And you were just experiencing some ray of the Rebbe, and therefore, it wasn't exactly, from that as a proof, as we said yesterday, that the light that he was bringing was not the ultimate light. Because as long as you're dealing with a light, which the source is over here, and it just extends to some faraway place, then you're still under the dimensions of what's called high and low, up and down, and you're still dealing with a limited level of godliness, which can be revealed more in one place than another place, if you recall from yesterday's conversation. But so the Alter Rebbe brought in this new thing where basically he could write it down in the book and send it across the world, and it was like you're sitting in front of the Rebbe. That's what they say about the Tanya, which is the Rebbe's 53 days that he spent in prison was a parallel to the 53 chapters of the Tanya. The Tanya was like the ultimate treatise of Chabad Chassidus. The Rebbeim afterwards said that when you're reading that, it's like you're sitting there having a one-on-one conversation with the Rebbe, because he put himself into the book and then he could be in France, like we said yesterday. He's no longer, you don't need to be standing by the Rebbe to have the Rebbe there, to have these teachings there. And that's why our generation took this to the unbelievable lengths, that the shluchim were invented. That you can go literally to France. I mean, that's pretty far from the Rebbe, and people weren't really doing that at those days. You can go to Japan, China, and you can basically unearth the fact that the well springs of Chassidus are mamash in France, even though the Rebbe maybe never set foot in there. So this is, though the Rebbe did set foot in France, but this is the idea basically, and it's very, very connected. In other words, all the like the Hasidic ways that we have, and the what Chabad looks like on the ground, that there's shluchim everywhere. It's not just stam. It's a living representation of the philosophy itself. Yeah.
Well, it's also related to bringing Mashiach, that the Torah has to be spread throughout the world, or the Chassidus needs to be spread.
Right. In other words, that there is no place that God is not. Right. So we're going to open up. Here's a wellspring. There's a wellspring. It's like you don't have to all sort of flow to Jerusalem in the same way. Not that there's not a concept that Jerusalem is sort of some kind of a center, obviously, but as we said, the holiness will spread to all the lands eventually, and there won't be any distinctions.
And he describes himself in the beginning of the Tanya. He says it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so anyway, let's go on. We're never going to get out of this mimer if we just keep going like that.
Right.
Okay, so he says, taking it from page Ayin base at the very bottom paragraph there. So we just, 3 lines from the bottom, we just said that when you bring out this level of really what's above the Yishtal Shlus, and it was the Hanukkah level, then hu shehu b'chol makam l'mayla v'lamate b'shaveh. It's a level where at every place, up and down, becomes equalized. Because you've gone beyond the whole concept of the worlds, and therefore there's literally no more Seder Yishtal Shlus where there's bigger vessels that hold more light, smaller vessels. That's all been discarded, and you just have something which is completely beyond every level of division and distinction. As we said, this is mainly found in Panimius Atik, because the revelation that comes out of the what's called the external aspect of Atik, which is the middle level of Keser, that mainly shines, so to speak, above. This shouldn't be new. It's just that it is drawn out and affects also the lower worlds. And as we said before in Sif Yud, this is the concept of Shlomo. He had the Gilu of Chitzonius Atik. He was working with the regular middle level of Atik. And that's why the main revelation was in Yerushalayim. He lit up his light in the base of Mikdash. But it also just affected Queen Sheba. It affected the whole world, but it wasn't over there. They had to come to him to get it, which indicates, okay, he was able to heal the whole world and basically make peace, but there was clearly a distinction between Jerusalem and Sheba, right? Still, and that shows that he was not ultimately hitting the level of completely beyond the worlds. There was still a distinction between high and low. The ikra in the Ishtal Shlus, whereas the real concept of what's called above the Ishtal Shlus, which is Shehu B'chol Makom B'Shaveh, which means it equates everything. There's no anymore concept of high and low. That's what the Ishtal Shlus means. It means a chain-like descent of the world, that one is higher and one's lower. So to go beyond the chain altogether, that's Panimius Atik. Shu Atzmo Nimsa Gam Lamata, which means that it itself is also found down below. Not just a ray of it, but since everything becomes equalized, then God is just as equally found in the highest, as the lowest worlds, as He's found in the highest worlds. That's basically the idea. He's just as much found, and what's the concept? And just one more line about that is that it's something. It's so distant from the worlds, right? That the greatest of the greatest kelim, which is, let's say, Atzilus, or some kind of like the brain or the mind in terms of a human body, it is equally not able to perceive this thing as the foot. In other words, since it's something which is beyond grasp, it doesn't matter how big your vessels are, you can't grasp it. And therefore, if it's going to be perceived and bring itself into any place, there's no reason that it's going to be found in a bigger vessel more than we found in a smaller vessel, because no vessel can grasp it at all. Right? So therefore, it basically defies the whole concept of grasp, and therefore it can find itself equally anywhere it wants to. Should it be found, it's found equally. In other words, the point is that usually it's never found. Usually you can't see it because the vessels can't grasp it. But should it come and reveal itself, finally after the Alter Rebbe, then there's no reason it can't reveal itself more in one place than another place because it's beyond everybody's grasp equally. And that's the whole idea, that if it's going to show up, it's going to show up everywhere at the same time. And what's more, that when it comes to the revelation of this level of Pnimius Atik, lo yeshno achiluk d'may lamata. There's no more distinction between up and down. It doesn't even exist anymore. Ki ayde agilu de Pnimius Atik nirgash b'chol davar. Because by revealing this thing, it's felt in everything. Shemetziya shelo gufa hi elokus. That its very existence is godliness. Like we said, the foot will be able to think. The flesh will be able to see. There's not going to be any more distinctions.
How about atoms?
Atoms too.
All the way down.
Don't leave him out of it.
Adams, Henry's.
No, the point is that if something exists, ultimately underlying its existence is Hashem. The only problem is that usually an entity is not dealing with its true underlying existence. It's caught up with sort of some projection of how it feels like it looks. It's only getting some kind of a ray of the essential aspect of godliness which is inside of it. So ultimately, if it will dig down deep enough, that's the idea of like crushing the olive. Crushing the olive means you have to there's basically 3 levels of liquid: water, wine, and oil. So it says water is found everywhere. Wine, you have to crush the grape, but it's not such a big job to crush a grape. You just crush it and it comes out. An olive, to get the oil out of an olive, it's like a little avoda. It doesn't come out so fast. So that's the idea of basically finding different depths of the life force inside of yourself. You can find basically a certain level of godliness is just like apparent. If you want to crush it, it's called the secrets of the Torah. You have to crush it. It says nichnas yayin yatzei sod. If wine comes in, secrets come out. When you drink wine, you start telling secrets. It's because you have to crush yourself a little bit, and you get to a deeper level of yourself. So crushing the olive means you're getting to the point where you're getting the essence out. What is the oil? The oil is the essence of a thing. So you break it down to its mamash essential place. Ultimately, everything sort of is made up of oils. If this is like a scientific thing, that everything has like oil at its basis, that you can take like an oil out of any matter in the world. It's called essential oils. You ever heard of this thing? People are healing with them and everything. Because everything, if you break it down to a certain point, you're going to bring like its essence out of it, which is its oil. At the end of the day, it's all the same substance underneath there. So this is the thing, that when you go deep enough, you'll find that atoms. What's the difference if it's an atom or if it's a universe? Everything, if it exists, its essential nature is the same. It's godliness. It's just that most of history we've not been able to dig so deep. Okay. Yud Gimel. V'zeu shener Hanukkah mitzvah lanich al Pesach beisu mibachutz l'reshus Rabbi. So we say this is why we have a mitzvah to put the Hanukkah candles outside your house into the public thoroughfare. Lo keneros hamikdash hayu bifnim, not like the candles of the Beis Hamikdash that were inside. Umisham heiru l'chutz, and from the inside they also shined outside. In other words, this is one of the questions that we originally asked in the beginning of the Maimer, which was, if the candles of the Hanukkah, their whole inyan is that they have the ability to shine up the darkness, fine, but what is the necessity to actually have them outside, right? In other words, you can have them inside, and you can light them during the day, and they would continue to shine during the night, and they could even shine in the darkness. Why do you have to actually put them outside, right? And on the contrary, seemingly putting them outside is sort of a backtracking. Who remembers why? Because we said when you go, we had a whole scenario that Moshe had to bring the ark into the place of the enemy. When he took the ark around into the desert, he was subduing the klippas over there, the snakes and the scorpions, but that represented a lacking on his end, that since he had to be in the place of the enemy, it's as though he basically recognized the existence of the enemy, and he was not able to nullify them so much. Whereas Shlomo, he stayed in his place, he didn't even recognize the existence of the enemy, and that's why he was able to undo their existence, because he wasn't like dealing with them on their level. He didn't have to come down to them. Do you remember this?
Yeah.
No? Okay, so, sorry, I think we talked about this in previous Maimer, but the idea is like this. We talked about the difference between Moshe and Shlomo in their ability to refine the world. That they both went out basically to refine the enemy, being the klippas, which is basically the forces that oppose godliness. For Moshe, it was the snakes and scorpions in the desert, because we went into the desert and there was these monstrous snakes and scorpions that no person could ever go into this desert. It was basically like a no man's land, and yet the Jews went in there with the ark, and wherever we went, the place like settled and trees grew. We brought like the well of Miriam. We were like in like a little paradise in the middle of this uninhabitable desert.
Only snakes and scorpions? What about like Amalek?
What about Amalek?
Yeah, and Pharaoh's army.
So that's also, yeah, but the idea is that we spent 40 years just traveling around with this ark in the desert. And like, what's the idea? Like, what was that for? So on the simple level, that was because like we were just waiting till the generation died, right? And so the next generation could go in. But on a much deeper level, it's not what it, you had Moshe Rabbeinu and Mamash, everybody, Yoshua, the whole gang was there. They weren't just like wasting their time whistling around. They were doing this unbelievable avoda, basically, of nullifying the darkness of the world, which took the form of this uninhabitable place. There was like this desert, which wasn't just a regular desert. It represented like a place where no man could dwell. It was like the last stand of like an uninhabitable world. And an uninhabitable world means that the darkness was so strong that people couldn't go and like make a godly dwelling out of it. Except the Jews, because we had the ark and we brought ourselves in there. We like settled the unsettlable, which is the purpose of all creation, basically. So for 40 years, the idea is that Moshe was going around with this ark, undoing this klippah and refining the world. However, we said that since he had to go into the land of the enemy, okay, then there's no way you can truly undo the existence of the enemy when you're battling him in his own land. Because the fact that you have to go travel to his land is already proof that you consider him an enemy, and you consider him some kind of formidable enemy, that you have to go into his place. So you can't undo his existence while you're simultaneously sort of exaggerating his existence by being there. You see, that's the idea. So Moshe was able to do the job of refining the world, but there was a great limitation. And this is all indicated in what we say, his line when he would go around in the desert. He would say, Kuma Hashem vayafutzu oivecha vayanusu misanecha. Which means, rise up Hashem, scatter your enemy, right? And the idea of scattering your enemy does not mean to destroy your enemy. The enemy will remain, it will just become scattered. So his ability to undo the klippah was that he was able to take away their opposition, but he wasn't able to take away their existence. They became scattered, but a scattered enemy is still like lurking in the shadows, waiting to come back. He's just like subdued. So that's the extent that Moshe was able to refine the world. Comes Shlomo, and the whole thing is he did not go into the enemy's lands. We just got through saying all the enemies would come to him and bring him their sparks and their tribute, and he was able to refine the world by not going into their land. So he represented a higher level because he didn't even recognize their existence. That's what we're saying. Like when you don't recognize the existence of a thing, then it's possible, it's basically saying you're bringing a level of divinity which is beyond the worlds. And if it's beyond the worlds, it has the ability to undo the whole existence of the worlds, and therefore he could refine them to a much greater degree, which he did. He created world peace for 40 years. So if the model is that the least interaction that you have with the enemy, the more you're able to refine him in this way, as we just sort of set up, then the narrows of Hanukkah form a problem. Because we just said that they're even further beyond the worlds than Shlomo. They represent the oil that rises above all liquids. And nevertheless, where do you put them? You don't put them inside, where seemingly they would belong, where they're like not dealing with the outside world. You put them outside into the, so to speak, land of the enemy. You light them in the dark. And you light them outside your house, which is seemingly like Moshe Rabbeinu, who has to go into the land of the enemy. How are you busy uprooting the enemy if you're recognizing and exacerbating his existence? We have this problem. So on one hand it's higher, on one hand it's tripping up onto the problem of Moshe Rabbeinu. You get that?
No.
Okay. Nice, that's the right answer. What's that? The case of Shlomo what?
Yeah, is it also a form of denial not to recognize the existence of something that is apparently coming to you that's there?
Well, that's a good point. So we ultimately, what do we say about Shlomo is that even though he, so to speak, was divorced from the world, he was divorced from the world. In other words, it was still, he didn't ultimately get away from it altogether. Because at the end of the day, there was a serious recognition between high and low. He was shining the light, and the lower beings were coming to him. So even though he didn't go into the land of the enemies, the Rabbi had like a little parenthesis there where he said he didn't know of the existence of the enemies, at least. He wasn't completely divorced from it. Or he was, as we've been saying, divorced, but therefore he was his ex, and he never really gets away from her. right?
And that's why after he passed, the peace didn't continue.
That's right, because he didn't like bring down the ultimate light.
And then what about with
The X's will be nullified.
Bar Yochai? So he was the highest.
He was the highest level. So he was like Hanukkah. He brought the Hasidic like dimension into the world, but again it was hidden. Right? There was attempts for this process to happen. Hanukkah was huge. It was basically the light of Mashiach came into the world, but it didn't like last. Right? And then it happened again, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and it happened again in Tzfas with the Arizal. But again, what happened to the writings of the Arizal? They were buried underground. Yeah, mamish. It's people don't realize this. Like Kabbalah was made certain attempts to come out, and literally when Rabbi Chaim Vital, who was the only one who was authenticated to write down the teachings of the Arizal, he wouldn't let anybody else write his writings down. He wrote them all. He wrote what's called the Kisvei Ari. He commanded upon his death they should be buried. No one should ever read them again. And there was this whole thing they had to like undo through a dream to undo his vow, and like someone went and dug them up. Like it wasn't so simple, and it happened much later. So the idea is that attempts were made to bring this like messianic light into the world. Remember, by the way, what happened in Tzfas when they were alive? They made a move to mamash bring Mashiach. That's why they basically reinstated the concept of smicha over here. The whole. It was a huge, unbelievable renaissance that took place in the city. They were like bucking for Mashiach. That's it. We're not going back. The rabbis in Jerusalem were having a fit. They were like, who are these messianic madmen of Tzfas? They say the same thing today.
Yeah, they're just next door.
And basically, maybe for different reasons, but they say the same thing today.
Yeah.
And basically, according to local legend, that's why the earthquakes happened here, and they leveled the whole city, because they were like, it's not time yet, sorry, the Baal Shem Tov hasn't been born. Although, it's very interesting to note that who was the Baal Shem Tov? You read the stories, he was a Yid that lived in Tzfat during that time, who was the secret, master of all things, who didn't reveal himself. So he was in that period of Tzfas Yiddishkeit, and he reincarnated into the Baal Shem Tov. So it was mamish like a carryover from Tzfas. The whole Hasidic movement ultimately was from this Yid from Tzfas, who was such a wonder. Eventually he was given the right to reveal himself in the form of the Baal Shem Tov. So really this town, I see Rabbi Shimon's here, the Arizal's here, Baal Shem Tov comes from here. This is the town that Mashiach's destined to come out of, is what it says. Anyway, we're getting excited. What's the answer to no? So the idea is that why isn't this a contradiction? You put the Hanukkah candles outside, you've fallen back into the folly of, so to speak, Moshe's problem. So, going in Yud Gimel here after the brackets, Ohr Ganuz Hanukkah meir es hachoshech to Reshus Harabim, because the Hanukkah candles shine up the darkness of the Reshus Harabim. It's because, who can answer it? It should be self-evident from everything we said. It's because this way of lighting up the darkness is not in the form of Shlomo, where you put the candles inside and they reach to the outside. This is the Mayanos, the well springs are found outside themselves. That you're going to spread the wellspring, not the river from the wellspring outside. Therefore, the Hanukkah candle, which represents this ultimate light, you stick it right in the dark, because it's not a limitation like Moshe's. It's not that it's recognizing the enemy. It's that it's so thoroughly not recognizing the enemy. It's saying that the enemy itself is a wellspring of divinity. I'm going to put you right in the dark. I'm going to show you that inside the klippas even is the Ohr Ganuz. If they'll just dig down deep enough, they realize that they are a wellspring of divinity. So you actually put it outside, not because it has the disadvantage of Moshe, because it has an advantage even higher than Shlomo's, because it recognizes no difference between inside and outside. That's also why we light them specifically after nightfall. It's because that they're able to lighten up the darkness of night. It's not in such a way that the main light is made in the day, but it just extends into the night. It has extensions into the night. But in the dark itself, there's already light. That's the Chiddush. Usually, you have to sort of get a little ray of the light which can affect the darkness. Here the Indian is, you're going to put the light right into the darkness, because you're not fooled by the darkness. If it's existing, I don't care if it's dark or light, its essence, essential existence is Elokus. So I'm going to light the candle of God right in the middle of the darkness. What's more, the Agdesha Ohr Ganuz Hanukkah Since this light is in the place and time of darkness, i.e. the Reshus HaRabban, you put it outside and at night, that makes it a choshech atzmo nefach le'or. This is the whole secret, that the darkness itself is transformed into light. In other words, there's an idea that, what's the concept basically that we just brought out about Moshe Rabbeinu? That no matter what you're going to do, even if you're going to shine a tremendous light on the darkness, you're just going to scatter them. You're not going to make them go away. Right? Because why? There's an essential difference between darkness and light. Just like what happens every day when the sun comes out, right? Oh, there's no more darkness. There is actually darkness. It's just being covered over by the sun. And what's the proof? As soon as the sun goes away, the darkness pops back up. You didn't take it away. You just basically covered it over and made it nullified temporarily. But you didn't undo darkness, right? So seemingly that's a paradox you can't get out of. Anytime you're going to shine light, for sure the darkness is going to go away. But that does not mean you undid the darkness. Because as soon as you shine, the light will go away, the darkness will come back. What's the only way to undo darkness? So in other words, even Shlomo, right? He also shined a great light. But since it was just shining a light on darkness, and as we said, the darkness was still recognized with him, he just shined a much, much bigger light. So it nullified it like mamish, like he was never going to be seen again. But guess what? As soon as his generation was over, well, he was the 15th generation. 15th represents the full moon. So the light was the most as it could ever be. But as soon as his generation left, the moon started getting smaller again, and the klippa started coming out again, because you can't undo darkness with light. It's just a hiding thing. What's the one way you can undo darkness, though? If you get to the point that the darkness itself becomes light. If you can turn darkness itself into light, then you mamish don't have any enemies anymore. And that's exactly what the Ohr Ganuz was, right? In the Gan Eden, there was no night. There was 36 hours of daylight, which means there was day, and there was day, and then there was day. Because the darkness turned itself into light. And that's the only way to really undo the enemy forever, is to show that he's not an enemy. That even the sickest, most disgusting thing in the world is an entity. If it's there, its underlying essential existence is godliness. But what? Usually it can't access that underlying essential existence. If it can access it, it'll realize that it itself is not a dark. It's not there to conceal God. There's nothing that can conceal God. It is God. So this is turning the darkness itself into light. What's that?
The spark that you said that is there, but some people, it's so covered with the klipot,
right,
that it's just impossible to reach, and it turns into it's still a spark, but it's like
it turns into a concealing spark. Exactly. But it's still a spark, right? And ultimately, you're going to point to it and say, hey, by the way, you think you're concealing God, but you remember you're also God? So you undo its opposition from the essence. You don't just subdue its opposition, you turn it into light.
And remove all the klipot.
No, you not just remove the klippas. Removing the klippas is what Moshe and Shlomo did. They're like, klippas, oh, get away. But they're still there, you just moved them away. But if you can make the klippa itself realize that it is Elokus, there's nowhere to move them away. There's no more opposition. The darkness itself is light. And that's why we put the candles, mamish, in the dark and at night, because it's indicating that Hanukkah bears inside of itself this level of mamish turning the darkness into light. And therefore there's literally world peace. There's no more enemies anymore. Yeah.
It's cool that the natural world represents that idea. That there is really no daytime, nighttime. That's just from our perspective. You get into space, there's just the sun. I mean, the sun never goes away. It's not like not night. There's no nighttime.
Yeah, the idea is if you get far enough away from the whole thing, you can sort of outdo the duality of the thing.
Yeah. What?
Yeah. Okay, so this is a deep thing. That's the idea. Let's go on. A few more minutes. It's a gewalt, really.
Yeah.
Al pi zeh yesh levar atam. Accordingly, we can understand the reason. Al zeh sham shachas gilui zeh haised dafka de masiris nefesh to Matisyahu banav. We're answering the very interesting questions that we had at the beginning of the Maimer. We forgot what they were already. Yeah. So we'll remind ourselves. But according to this, we can understand why this light was first entered into the world at Hanukkah time, specifically by Matisyahu and his children. V'lo agedei masiris nefesh to Purim. If you recall, we were saying, how did this light come into the world? Because they had masiris nefesh. right? When you give of yourself to such a high level, you go beyond your own Seder Ishtalshlus, you go beyond your own sort of rational way of thinking based on the intellect is higher than the heart. We have our own Seder Ishtalshlus, our natural kind of conduct, which is that our intellect rules, right? So if you go beyond your own Seder Ishtalshlus, I mean, you'll start doing things for no reason, with no recourse to like asking yourself why. You just like sort of lose yourself in a divine ecstasy of an action. So when you do that, that's why they were able to summon Hashem's level of beyond the Seder Ishtalshlus, right? It was measure for measure. So if that's the case, why didn't Purim have this great asset of reaching the Panimius Atik? Because not only did they have Mesiras Nefesh, but every single Jew had Mesiras Nefesh during the time of Purim. Not just Matisyahu and a few of his sons. That was the question we had in the beginning of the Mimer. Do you understand the question?
Should I ask you a stupid question?
There's no stupid questions.
Who was Matisyahu?
He was the hero of the Hanukkah story. He was the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, who basically decided we've had enough of these Greeks, and he literally armed himself and a handful of his own sons, and they just single-handedly took on the entire Greek army.
Oh.
So it's like it was insane. It was Mesiras Nefesh, we called it, like complete self-sacrifice. Basically, you're running to die, but they were like, that's it, we're going to do it. And because they had this wild, crazy Mesiras Nefesh, Hashem went above his Seder Ishtalshlus and made a miracle for them.
But why Purim, if everyone was at that level, why wasn't that higher than Hanukkah?
That's exactly the question. That's the question. The Rebbe is also bothered by that. He's saying, what's going on here? At Purim, even more so, they should have had this Panimius Atik. And there's no discussion of Panimius Atik on Purim. Or at least not till Purim. Because what's the difference? The Mesiras Nefesh of Matisyahu is that even though they were weak and few, they fought against the mighty and the many. You don't find so much in Purim that scenario. They were just sort of like, they were praying, they were fasting. They didn't go and take arms up against the government. Only with permission at the end. At that point, they were emboldened, they were empowered. The king signed on. They weren't going against the many; they became the many. Right? The king gave them a decree. You have my permission to kill your enemies. That's a whole different thing than you're being the enemy of the king. Right?
Yeah.
This that they went up and took action in nature. Right? In other words, in Purim they took action, but not in nature. They prayed. They took action like with Hashem. But in the Hanukkah story, they're like, okay, we got to fight the fight, let's do it. They took action in nature. They were dealing with the actual natural Klippa world. In order to overcome the Greeks. Even though in nature there's no room whatsoever that the few and the weak can overcome the great, the poor, the mighty and the many. So what's the whole idea? What was their secret? It was munach etzlam. It was pashut, clear by them. Upgelegt. It was just sitting in them as like a fact of the matter. Shegam hateva de olam hazeh atachton. That even the nature of this lowly physical world, that klippas govrimbo, where it's totally overrun by evil forces and klippas, they were totally sitting in them this notion that this was also elokus. In other words, they were not bothered by the presence of klippa, because by them it was so clear that einod bilvado. What klippa can get in my way when all it is elokus, and I'm on the mission of elokus? It can stand in my way. By them it was so, there was no opposition in their minds. They were literally holding on a level higher than Shlomo HaMelech. Shlomo HaMelech didn't deal with the enemy, but he still recognized that there's such a thing as an enemy. They better come to me and get fixed. These guys were sitting there like, what can stop me? What can oppose Elokus? There's nothing in my way, even though it was mamash the biggest army in the world. And so they went out like a regular day's work just to take care of it. That showed by them their attitude of where they were holding, what like light they were actually bearing inside of them, that there was nothing but Elokus in the world. They got to like the bottom of it, that nothing can stand in the way of God because He's all there is.
Is there any accounting of the physical actions of the day?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're hearing all these.
No, they took like measures. Like they had like sneak attacks and like it was described how they did it. They were basically like doing it like guerrilla warfare. They sort of like invented basically. Like, they would like come and grab them from one place. They would make it look like there was a lot more people than there were. Like they had like a whole like natural war that they went out after. Which is the point. It wasn't miraculous in that sense. What was miraculous was the victory. But the actual war was like, okay, let's go to battle. They didn't call upon like, fire from heaven. Because they didn't need to, because there's no difference between miracles and nature as far as concerned. God is found in the nature as much as He's found in the miracles. Let's just take care of it naturally. That's the Chiddush. Which is why also in our, we're commanded to go into these towns and make the whole town, I'm saying as the Rebbe Shluchim, make the whole town a godly place. Not so much with miracles. Go talk to the mayor, go build a big building, go collect all the funds, like as though like the world does not hate Jews and like want to see anything but that happen. We're like, no problem. Pass the shaitels, we're gonna it's crazy. But that's the attitude that everyone puts inside of us. Even when the world is in such a state that it's not even like a healthy looking world, it's a state like today's world when the wicked are like rising up everywhere. Nonetheless, it's elokus. They were under this attitude. All it is godliness. I'm not afraid of it. The nachazu, this attitude, he mitzada hergesh sha'amisis hamatzoi yisbarach hu amatzius de kolanim tzoyim. And what is this attitude? That, as we've been saying hundreds of times in this class, that the true existence of God is the existence of everything. There's no thingness. All there is elokus. They were so living with that at that level that basically nothing can stand in their way. And that's what enabled them to tap into Panimius Atik and to get to it. And therefore, when you tap into Panimius Atik, what happens? The enemies disappear. You start to have miracles and menorahs and all kinds of good things. We have 2 minutes, right? Let's finish this baby so we can go on. We got a lot of nice things ahead of us here. We still have 4 minutes even on your clock. And this is the whole secret. Why the time of Hanukkah is what's called Kalya Rigla the Tarmudai. We learned this in Gemara. It means when the feet of the Tarmudai, which is a certain nation called Tarmud, when their feet would be cleared out from the shuk,
all right,
that's when the official lighting of Hanukkah candles begins. Mm-hmm. Okay, because they were a nation that basically sold wooden chips to light fires. No one had electricity. And so they would stick around the shuk for people to basically go home and realize they didn't have any wooden chips, and then go back to the shuk and buy them from them. They were like sort of like handlers over there. They had a good business cooking. And so when they finally left the shuk, it was mamish night. There was going to be no more passers-by because they were the ones that waited for the last passers-by. So that's called Kaliyad Rigla the Tarmudai. That's when the official lighting of Hanukkah can begin. But what is the secret behind this? Tarmudai hemoridim b'malchus shamayim. The word Tarmudai is the same letters as moredes, which means an intentional rebeller against Hashem. So these Tarmudai were not just good businessmen. They were wicked as wicked could come. And it says in the footnote over here that when the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, they were the first ones to come and start like looting it. They were part of the whole, which means that even in the days of Shlomo, they were basically unaffected by Shlomo's light. The Beis HaMikdash light, they never went for it. They were those people that were unaffected by Shlomo HaMelech. They were the lowest of the low.
They weren't Jews?
No, they weren't Jews. And the idea is that they represent this radical opposition to godliness. V'ayidei Ner Chanukah, and through Ner Chanukah, easy does it, through Ner Chanukah, Naisa Kalya Rigla Tarmudai, right? It becomes that the Kalya Rigla Tarmudai means you undo the foot, or as it were, of the Tarmudai. Kalya Rigla literally means when they would leave, but the actual word Kali means to destroy, basically, to destroy the feet of the Tarmudai. And he basically says there's Shnei Perushim b'zeh. There's two explanations of what it means Kalya Rigla Tarmudai. One, that the light of Hanukkah is Mechala o Mevatel, as I just said, it destroys Rigla the Tarmudai. It destroys the foot of the Tarmudai. What's the foot of the Tarmudai? He doesn't say here, but he says in other places, the Tarmudai themselves have a level, and the foot is the lowest level of these rebellions. In other words, the most evil man on earth, basically, who's just like, his sole purpose is to oppose Hashem. We've had a few of those. So even him, even the foot of the rebeller, he's Mechale u'mevatel, he gets nullified by the light of Hanukkah. That's explanation number one, but this is better. The second is that the light of Hanukkah affects a kilion. Kalia miloshin kilion klois hanefesh. Klois hanefesh does not mean to destroy. The word kilion or kalia has two opposite meanings. One is to destroy something, to nullify it. One is to long for something. Klois hanefesh means you have such an unbelievable longing and desire for Hashem that your soul could leave your body. You have to be careful not to go so excited that your soul leaves your body. That's called klois hanefesh. And what it says is that Kalia rigla the Tarmudai is not just that they were destroyed, but you made this rebellious people have this longing, unbelievable longing for Hashem themselves. You know that the wicked mamish amongst the people of the earth, they themselves will not only be destroyed, they'll be longing for Hashem. And that's what the light of Hanukkah candles is able to affect on them, because it turns the darkness into light. Even those rebellers will come to a state of klois hanefesh. And this is the Eloi Shel Biro Shal Yedei Neros Chanukah. This is what Neros Chanukah has in its effect of uplifting the world over and above that took place in the days of Shlomo. Because in the days of Shlomo, it was only able to affect those sparks that had some kind of a feeling for light, as we said. And not the sparks that had completely darkened, not the klippas themselves. And certainly it was not able to affect these Tarmudai who were mamish standing in opposition to Shlomo openly, even in those great days. They didn't hurt anybody, but they never went along for it. But through the Gila of Hanukkah, can get that these Tarmudai themselves will not only go away, they'll be begging the Jews to convert, and they want to be involved in everything holy, because the darkness itself comes to the realization that it itself is godliness. You guys don't have this page. Just to finish off, from this it's understood that the Indian of spreading the well springs of Chassidus, which is basically we have this light, we can just bring it anywhere we want to go, that even those that are in a situation that they're the most rebellious, right? You say, I'll try to do Mivtzoyim, this guy, there's no chance, because he's a mamash, an atheist, and he's a professor in a university level atheist. Sorry, in the light of the Hanukkah candle light, which is the Chassidus, even the biggest rebellers, including those who are mamish rebelling against Hashem, through spreading the wellsprings of Chassidus, you will nullify their existence to the point that not just nullify them, you'll get them screaming for Hashem themselves. And what's more than this, there'll be an Indian of kilayon, klois hanefesh, there'll be mamish longing for godliness. And you see it, you're looking at it. V'al derech sheyeh lasid lavo. And this is what will be in the future to come. Sha'az yeh v'es ruach atuma avim min ha'aretz, that at that time, it says, all the spirit of impurity I will remove from the earth, and what's more, so it says two things regarding the future. I'll remove the spirit of impurity. That's the idea of I'll nullify the klippas. But further, it says I'm going to transform the nations to speaking the proper language, which means that everybody on earth is going to serve Hashem as one.
One question. I don't understand the Chassidus level. If his level is like everything is one, then why didn't everybody go to war?
Because it wasn't a war, so to speak. It was just like it was for him. It was just like another day at work, making it clear that nothing opposes Hashem, not even nature, not even the force, like the intense forces of nature, which are like a storm and like the madness of nature. For him, that's also God. So those his fight against it was basically just to make it clear that was also divinity, that can't stand in the way of God, that the clip itself is going to fall before us, and even more so, we're going to conquer it.
But I thought his level was not that you should destroy the clip, but the clip itself is godliness.
So that's
why is he hitting it with a sword?
In other words, because I guess you have to, in order to make it come to God, you have to do something with it. You have to go spread Chassidus to. You don't ignore it. That's the idea that you go out to the town with the Chassidus. But that's not a contradiction to thinking that the town is some kind of an opponent. You're going to go to the town and make the town itself with the Chassidus become a Chassidish town. So basically, that is what happened. And ultimately, we did take the Greek philosophy with us. You know, when we talk about, the Rambam starts to talk about his most famous Hilchos Kiddush HaChodesh. He says this information came originally from the Jews, but we now speak of it with the Greek language. The Rambam wrote a whole book based on Aristotle and so forth. They took the Greeks with them.
I know, based on that, then the Maccabees should have converted them, not killed them.
Not converted them, but they converted their philosophy. They did ultimately convert them. Everything that was Greek, basically was taken in and converted to Judaism. We used their architecture, their wisdom, we took it all and we made it ours.
I don't understand if someone's going to war and they're killing people, they're saying that this cannot be elevated. It's like the Machmor, it's like this has to be taken out.
Well, no, what I'm trying to say is that there's two explanations. One is that you nullify it, one is that you transform it.
Yeah.
So I think on a certain sense that he did both. He nullified like the opposition of it, like supernaturally, showing that nature is on your side does not help you. So that itself is showing you that nature is God. So in a certain sense he transformed nature to be ungodly. And the other hand, they took over the culture of the Greeks as well, and like incorporated into Yiddishkeit and transformed it. I hear what you're saying, but I mean, we have to see like in a certain sense it's the idea of
I just feel like if someone like hits the point of like a spiritual revelation, like oh my gosh, there's Hashem, the first thing they'll be like, their behavior from that revelation will be okay. Let's go to war. Like let's go to war is the idea
maybe that
like,
is what happened. Maybe that is what
happened.
Where did the Greeks go? In other words, we killed every single one of them in their army. I mean, perhaps it was the kind of concept of Rabbi Mahayimadi. Ultimately, there was enough of them.
Big ones.
Grande. But at a certain point, they're like, okay, we're not fighting this battle anymore. The Greeks basically put down their weapons at a certain point. It seems like that's what happened, no? I mean, there was only like 8 guys fighting like thousands, right? So, I mean, they're like, all right, Jews, I guess it's all yours. Take it back.
That makes more sense versus them like killing everyone.
Yeah, I don't think they did kill them. They wasn't like, we don't hear a story that like just the slain bodies of millions, that they had to bury and everything. They went home.
Wow.
And more than they went home, we took their culture, the good parts of it, we incorporated it in a certain sense into ours. To the point that it says that the Greek language, we can even write a Sefer Torah, Mamish conversion,
That's it. Go to walk.
Although I think that was probably true even before that. I think it was probably true even before that. Before the war.
Nothing like it.
The tents were not open to it to mouth to mouth. They're open like
I say